Welcome to This Day in His Story, created by American Heritage Worldwide. A reminder that every day holds something new to learn. Did you know that John F. Kennedy received the Navy and Marine Corps Medal for Heroism during World War II when he towed a severely burned crewmate for 3.5 miles by a strap from a life vest in his teeth? Learn how, despite his own injuries, Kennedy swam for hours in shark-infested waters and used a coconut to send a rescue message after their PT boat was struck by a Japanese destroyer in the Solomon Islands. Discover that when Kennedy was elected as the 35th President of the United States, he inspired America with the famous words, "Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country." Imagine you are stranded in the pitch black, violently churning waters of the South Pacific.
Oh, wow.
Right? It's 1943, and your patrol torpedo boat has just been literally physically sliced in half.
Just smashed to pieces.
Smashed to pieces by a massive Japanese destroyer. The wreckage is burning all around you. Your crew is marooned.
Yeah, and some are badly injured, I'm sure.
Exactly, badly injured, and nobody is coming to save you. You are completely on your own, and you're forced to physically tow your men through the ocean just to survive.
It's unimaginable.
It really is a moment of absolute primal desperation, and it is exactly the moment that forged the 35th President of the United States.
It really is.
So welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we are taking you on a journey into the life, the presidency, and really the enduring philosophy of John F. Kennedy.
Yeah, and our mission today isn't just to, walk you through some dry historical timeline.
Right. No, we are looking at a very specific mechanism here. We're looking at how Kennedy took this abstract, noble concept of service and literally weaponized it to shape an entire nation and really the global order.
Absolutely.
And to do this, we are pulling directly from historical texts and excerpts focused on JFK's legacy of service and freedom to bring you the absolute, undisputed facts of his life.
And honestly, it's the perfect place to start. Because when we talk about Kennedy, it is so easy to get blinded by the mythology.
Oh, for sure. The Camelot of it all.
Right, exactly. But that concept of service, that's the exact key to understanding him.
Yeah.
His early life experiences, shifting from this extreme privilege to these devastating, life-threatening lows, it created the exact blueprint for how he would later govern the country.
Yeah.
He didn't just inherit a philosophy of leadership, he survived his way into one.
Okay, let's unpack this, because from the outside looking in, his early life doesn't look like a struggle at all.
No, not at all.
It looks like an absolute fairy tale. He was born on May 29th, 1917, into this prominent Irish Catholic family.
He was the second of 9 children, actually.
Right. And we are talking about a serious golden ticket kind of upbringing. Private schools, idyllic summers sailing on the shores of Cape Cod.
Very privileged.
And his father, Joseph Kennedy, was the U.S. ambassador to Great Britain in 1937. So while most college kids are just trying to figure out how to, pass their final exam.
Or just get through the week.
Yeah, right. John is traveling through Europe with his ambassador father.
Exactly. He was essentially given a front row seat to global diplomacy before he even had a college degree.
Wow.
And then he graduated from Harvard University in 1940. And he didn't just write a typical senior thesis to graduate.
What did he do?
He wrote a thesis titled Why England Slept. And it was actually published as a book.
That's crazy.
Yeah, so he was operating on a completely different playing field than almost anyone else his age.
Right, but I have to push back a little here. Because writing a book on foreign policy while you're at Harvard, or touring Europe with your diplomat dad, it sounds a lot like theorizing from an ivory tower.
It is. It's very sheltered.
Yeah, it's easy to have strong opinions about global affairs when your biggest risk is, getting a B- on a paper.
Right, exactly.
So how does that translate into the kind of leadership that actually asks people to bleed for their country?
Well, that is the crucial pivot. Because that ivory tower theory violently collided with reality.
Okay.
Before Kennedy could look the American public in the eye and ask them to serve, he had to define what service meant for himself in the most visceral way possible.
Right.
So in 1941, he joins the U.S. Navy. He spends time in the South Pacific commanding that PT boat, the PT-109.
And then we get to that terrifying moment we talked about in the introduction. Out in the Solomon Islands, the Japanese destroyer strikes his boat.
Yeah, and he doesn't just survive it. He heroically saves his marooned crew, which actually earns him the Navy and Marine Corps Medal.
Wow. But the reality of this war doesn't just stop at his own near-death experience, right?
No, it doesn't.
Because in 1944, tragedy absolutely shatters his family. His older brother, Joseph Jr., is killed.
Yeah, his Navy airplane exploded during a secret mission against Germany.
I mean, you have this immense, almost unfathomable privilege colliding head-on with visceral, life-threatening reality. Did surviving the absolute disaster of the PT-109 and then losing his older brother to the exact same war, did that create this profound sense of duty? Is that what accelerated his political ambition?
Well, I'd say it went far deeper than just political ambition. It was this hard-earned, really agonizing realization that true leadership requires personal skin in the game.
Skin in the game. I like that.
Yeah, think about the psychology here. When you have watched your own boat sink, when you've felt the ocean water in your lungs, and when your own family has been permanently broken by the cost of war.
The concept of service completely stops being a political talking point.
Exactly. It becomes an existential necessity. He realized that the people making the decisions to send young men into harm's way need to intimately understand the actual cost of those decisions.
That makes total sense.
And that realization just catapulted him forward. By age 29, he's elected to the Massachusetts House of Representatives, where he serves 3 terms.
Wow, young.
Very young. And then by 1952, he wins a seat in the U.S. Senate.
Which brings us to the Oval Office. He is sworn in as the 35th President of the United States in January 1961.
That's right.
So he has this deeply ingrained skin-in-the-game mentality, but having that philosophy as a young senator is one thing. How does that actually hold up when he's suddenly sitting behind the resolute desk and navigating a global superpower?
It becomes the absolute cornerstone of his entire domestic and diplomatic strategy. He essentially scales up his personal understanding of duty to the national level.
Right.
And it's really important to note, he did not orchestrate this alone.
Oh, definitely not. We have to talk about Jackie.
Yes, absolutely.
They were married in September 1953, Jacqueline Lee Bouvier. And Jackie became this incredibly popular first lady. Now, I always sort of thought of her as this massive cultural and fashion icon, but the sources make it clear she was a highly strategic asset, right?
Highly strategic. I mean, once in the White House, she completely renovated it. She added modern conveniences that the building desperately needed, but she painstakingly preserved its rich history.
Which is brilliant.
It was. But more importantly, she was a true diplomatic force. Along with her husband, she was instrumental in establishing positive diplomatic relations with leaders all over the globe.
Yeah, she presented this vision of American culture, intellect, and sophistication to the world.
Exactly. And during the ideological battle of the Cold War, that kind of cultural diplomacy was a vital, tangible asset.
And speaking of that ideological battle, that brings us to the defining articulation of his presidency, his inaugural address.
Yeah.
It features arguably one of the most famous pieces of advice ever given to the American public. He stood there and said, "Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country."
A legendary quote.
But he didn't stop at the borders of the United States. He turned his attention to the people of the world and added, "Ask not what America will do for you, but what together we can do for the freedom of man."
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Kennedy is looking at the geopolitical map and attempting to curb the spread of communism, which was the existential threat of the era.
Right.
But look at the mechanism of how he frames it. He isn't just calling for a massive military buildup or, more bombs. He is urging Americans to work harder against what he called the common enemies of man.
And he specifically defined those enemies as tyranny, poverty, disease, and war itself.
Yes.
Oh.
He is totally redefining the battlefield.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
Because a few months later, in the spring of 1961, he issues Executive Order number 19924. This establishes the Peace Corps.
Right, the Peace Corps.
He is officially asking young Americans to volunteer for 2 years to go abroad and help people in impoverished nations. Now, if you think about it, it's like trying to win a bitter neighborhood dispute, not by building a higher, heavily armed fence, but by walking over and helping your neighbor fix their roof.
That's a great analogy.
You completely disarm their hostility by making yourself indispensable to their survival. It was the ultimate deployment of soft power.
Yeah.
Instead of sending 20-somethings abroad in military uniforms holding rifles, he is arming them with education, with agricultural knowledge, with medical aid.
He essentially weaponized idealism.
Weaponized idealism. Wow.
Yeah, by turning domestic youth into a global diplomatic asset, he created a mechanism to fight communism without firing a single shot.
Because communism, as an ideology, thrives on desperation and poverty.
Exactly. If you can send American volunteers to help an impoverished nation build its infrastructure and fight disease, you eliminate the
You
desperation.
solve the root problem.
Right. You demonstrate the value of democratic freedom far more effectively than you ever could through military intimidation alone.
But I have to jump in here.
Go for it.
Because as brilliant as soft power and empathy are, they seem incredibly naive when literal brick walls are being built and nuclear missiles are being armed. You can't fix a roof if the house is being firebombed.
You are absolutely right, and that was the brutal reality of the Cold War. Soft power has its limits.
Yeah.
The geopolitical reality, specifically his relationship with the Soviet Union, was incredibly volatile. To stop East Germans from escaping communist rule, the Soviet Union literally built a wall dividing East and West Germany.
They physically cut a city in half to trap people inside an ideology.
Yeah.
And Kennedy's response isn't soft power, is it? It's pure hardline defiance. He sends a U.S. Army convoy right into West Berlin to physically prove America isn't backing down.
Which was incredibly risky.
Extremely. And then in June 1963, he goes to West Berlin himself. He stands in front of this electrified crowd looking at the very real wall the Soviets built and delivers one of the most famous speeches of the 20th century. He tells them, "Ich bin ein Berliner," meaning I am a Berliner.
It is the ultimate expression of solidarity. He's telling the people trapped behind the Iron Curtain that their struggle for freedom is America's struggle.
Yeah.
But that tension in Berlin was really just a prelude to the true Nightmare scenario. The moment where idealism and defiance collided with the threat of literal human extinction.
Oh, boy.
October 1962.
The Cuban Missile Crisis.
Yes. President Kennedy receives intelligence that the Soviets have placed actual nuclear missiles in Cuba.
Just miles from Florida.
Right. This isn't theoretical. These are nuclear warheads dangerously close to the American coastline. The threat is immediate, it is physical, and it is catastrophic.
Wait, hold on. Let's look at this from the perspective of his military advisors in the room. They are looking at the intelligence, and their immediate suggestion is an airstrike and a full ground invasion of Cuba.
Right. That was their plan.
And honestly, from their perspective, the Soviets just parked nukes in our backyard. Why wouldn't an airstrike be the most logical, immediate move here? Isn't doing anything less just kicking the can down the road while the enemy arms themselves?
It seems logical until you understand the mechanics of nuclear escalation, which Kennedy grasped intimately.
Okay.
If you launch an airstrike on those missile sites, you kill Soviet personnel. The moment Soviet blood is spilled, Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev is forced to retaliate.
Right, he can't just do nothing.
Exactly, likely by attacking Berlin or launching whatever remaining missiles they had. Kennedy knew that the moment the first shot is fired, the situation spirals entirely out of anyone's control.
So it's not a localized strike, it's global war.
She feared an airstrike wouldn't solve the problem. It would instantly ignite a full-scale nuclear war.
So what does this all mean? If you step back and look at the sheer mechanics of this, it is the most high-stakes game of poker in human history. And folding meant absolute nuclear annihilation. And this is exactly where I think his origin story kicks back in. Kennedy's intimate, terrifying experience on the PT-109 gave him first-hand knowledge of the chaos of violence.
Yes, that's skin in the game.
Right. He knew what happens when machinery breaks, when communications fail, and when people start dying. That visceral memory made him deeply, profoundly resistant to his advisors' rush toward immediate violence.
Precisely. He had the unique ability to synthesize the terror of the moment, spot the patterns in global escalation, and confidently forge a middle path when surrounded by voices demanding war.
So what did he do?
Instead of an invasion, he chose a blockade. He ordered a fleet of 18 American ships to remain in the Atlantic Ocean near Cuba. They formed a literal physical barrier.
Right.
These ships would bar any Soviet vessels heading to Cuba.
Just imagine the logistical tension of that. An 18-ship barricade on the open ocean. If a Soviet ship doesn't stop, do American ships fire?
And if they fire, do the missiles launch?
Exactly. For several days, the entire world essentially held its breath, waiting to see who would blink first.
And finally, Khrushchev blinked. He turned his Soviet ships around and removed the missiles from Cuba. President Kennedy's daring, calculated decision literally averted a global nuclear war.
He proved that restraint, backed by absolute unyielding resolve, can be more powerful than preemptive violence.
He successfully defended freedom abroad by holding the line. But what's fascinating here is that while he was holding that line globally, Kennedy was being forced to confront a deeply uncomfortable reality within his own borders.
Oh, I see what you're saying. He couldn't stand in West Berlin and preach about freedom for all men while simultaneously ignoring what was happening at home.
Right.
The hypocrisy was globally visible. You can't successfully defend the concept of democratic freedom abroad when you have a glaring hypocrisy of inequality in America.
Kennedy believed that equality and civil rights were the absolute most important domestic issues of the day.
It was a moral imperative, and the mechanics of segregation were brutal.
They really were.
When the first black students were admitted to the University of Mississippi and the University of Alabama, they weren't just facing legal hurdles, they faced violent systemic opposition.
Yeah. And Kennedy responded by utilizing federal power. He sent National Guard troops to directly assist and protect those students, enforcing their right to an education.
He went further than just enforcing the current laws, too. Going back to his inaugural promises, President Kennedy committed to sending comprehensive civil rights legislation to Congress. He was trying to dismantle the legal framework of inequality.
He was laying the groundwork for a massive societal shift. But tragically, he would not live to see that legislation passed.
In November 1963, President Kennedy went to Dallas, Texas. The primary purpose of this trip was to discuss his ideas about civil rights with the Democrats.
Yeah.
He and Jackie were driving through the city in an open motorcade out amongst the public, and it was there that President Kennedy was shot by assassin Lee Harvey Oswald. He died within the hour.
It's just a heartbreaking moment in history.
And it is an absolute, undisputed fact that questions remain about Oswald's motive and that there were other conspirators involved in the assassination.
This raises an important question, though, about legacy and how a suddenly cut short life fundamentally changes how we view a leader.
How so?
Well, the tragedy immortalized his unfulfilled promises. Because he was gone, the heavy lifting of actually getting his civil rights legislation passed through a divided Congress was left to his successor.
President Lyndon B. Johnson.
Exactly, who ultimately signed it into law.
The grief of the nation was just overwhelming. They designed his funeral to be modeled after the funeral of President Abraham Lincoln.
Another president struck down by an assassin's bullet while trying to heal a fractured nation.
The imagery of that day is permanently burned into the American consciousness. His flag-draped casket was moved from the White House to the U.S. Capitol by 6 gray horses.
Yeah.
And they were accompanied by one riderless black horse with boots reversed in the stirrups, symbolizing the fallen leader.
The sheer scale of the mourning was unprecedented. Over 250,000 people filed past President Kennedy's casket in the Capitol Rotunda to pay their respects.
That's incredible.
And think about what they were actually mourning. They weren't just mourning a man. They were mourning the sudden, violent loss of the vision he had articulated for them.
A vision of service, of soft power, of equality.
Exactly.
Which brings us directly back to you, listening to this deep dive right now. Why does all of this history, these naval collisions, these ocean blockades and motorcades from the 1960s, why does it matter to you today?
It's the big question.
Let's go back to that famous advice. Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. That isn't just a catchy political slogan. It connects to a much deeper, older philosophical concept.
Yeah, it really does.
In fact, you can find this exact same ethos echoed in the Book of Mormon. The prophet Alma in Mosiah chapter 18, verses 8 through 9, gives this advice. He says, "Bear one another's burdens that they may be light and comfort those that stand in need of comfort."
It is the exact same fundamental principle of human obligation. Kennedy's call to create the Peace Corps, his use of the National Guard to support civil rights, even his physical towing of his crewmates in the Pacific, it is all an echoing of that ancient mandate to bear one another's burdens.
So the question for you is, in what ways can you help America by helping others? In what ways can you join with others for the freedom of mankind?
It doesn't necessarily mean jumping on a PT boat, you know.
Right, and it doesn't necessarily mean moving across the world to build infrastructure, but the call to service remains just as urgent.
And that leaves us with one final, fascinating thought to mull over.
Okay, what is it?
If John F. Kennedy were to stand at a podium and give his inaugural address today, speaking to our hyper-digital, often incredibly isolated modern world, what specific modern burdens would he ask you to bear for your country?
Oh, that's really interesting.
Right. How does the legacy of service translate into an era defined by remote work, algorithmic echo chambers, and social media? The landscape has changed entirely, but the absolute necessity of having skin in the game hasn't.
What a profound question. The tools change, the battlefields change, but the crucible remains.
Exactly.
We want to thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. We hope it gave you a new lens on a familiar face and a deeper understanding of the mechanics of service. Keep exploring, keep bearing those burdens, and most importantly, keep asking the big questions. Thank you for joining us for this day in His story. May the lessons of yesterday inspire you to see God's hand today and to play your part in His story now. For more faith-based learning, visit ahsworldwide.org, the homeschool for faith and family.